Greetings and salutations. My name's That Guy, this is the 28th, and thank you for listening to Aim for the Top, an Otaku's weekly sports review, where we make the sports world safe for anime fans, one tortuous reference at a time. If you've listened to us before, welcome back. If this is your first time listening, welcome aboard. So for this episode, it's going to be all about Super Bowl 55. The Chiefs versus the Buccaneers. Brady versus Patrick Mahomes. I guess part 3, because they played this year in the regular season. They played in it was the 2018 season, but in 2019, January 2019, for the AFC Championship game. Now they're playing again. But, yeah, so I guess it's 3, but I always thought of it as 2. Maybe it's part 2 in the playoffs. How about let's put it like that. Anyways, it's the Super Bowl. So this is going to be all about the Super Bowl, giving you a little preview. It's probably going to be a shorter episode than the others, just because I may not have tons of material to talk about. But that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be all about the Super Bowl. Who will emerge victorious? Who will go down in defeat? Dynasties will be established, legacies forever forged in football history. The great plays, the terrible plays, the agony, the ecstasy, all will be on display Sunday at, around 5:30, I suppose, Central Time. History will be written with the blood, sweat, and tears of the 96 men that take the field this Sunday evening. Human instrumentality will be achieved. Alright, not so much in that last one. Although maybe one day, when the 4th movie comes out, it's one of these days, it's going to come out, so they say. Anyways, alright, enough with the introductions. Alright, let's get to some Super Bowl talk. Going to be played in the lovely stadium there in Tampa Bay. Actually, I don't know where it is, to be honest. I'm not sure if it's actually in Tampa Bay proper, or is it somewhere outside the area, just like here in AT&T Stadium, even though, we're the Dallas Cowboys, don't actually play in Dallas, play in Arlington, Texas. Anyways, Tampa Bay's, they're going to be the first team to play the Super Bowl in their home stadium, so maybe in a normal year, that would give them something of an advantage, but obviously not this year. It's probably not going to matter very much, just like home field advantage hasn't mattered quite as much this year as opposed to previous years. And I assume that's probably true of all sports, that the home team no longer has that significant advantage. And I guess it's because for football, it's just because fans can get so loud when the opponent, when they're on offense. So, they can't call signals and stuff, call plays, communicate. Makes it really hard when you have 100,000 people yelling, screaming, making all sorts of loud noises to interrupt them. Anyways, let's start with the most important part of any football game, the injury report. No, really, I'm serious, as any fantasy football player will tell you. And I do play fantasy football, and I'm terrible at it just for this reason. And that's because I don't generally consult the injury report, but it is very important to get a sense of who is going to play, who is not going to play. Sometimes, there's surprises like, whoa, why is this guy on an injury report? Wow, that's crazy. Anyways, the injury reports are always important. So for the Chiefs, they got a number of guys that were on the injury report. Of course, Eric Fisher, tore his Achilles. Yeah, he's done. Willie Gay, he's already been declared out. And I should say this injury report was as of Friday. So I think maybe there's going to be one that comes out Sunday morning. But sorry, I'm done doing my research for this. So this is as of Friday. Sammy Watkins, he's questionable with the calf injury, but he was a full participant in practice. Le'Veon Bell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Rashad Fenton, Patty Mahomes, Mike Rimmers, L'Jarius Sneed, Darwin Thompson, and Andrew Wiley. All of them except Darwin Thompson were full participants in practice. So in other words, they're almost certainly going to play in the game. So actually, I guess that's kind of kind of a big thing that Chiefs get Sammy Watkins back. Although, man, he's been gone for gosh, has it been like 2 months probably since he played last, maybe more. I mean, he hasn't played a ton during this season, and since this is the Chiefs, they don't really need his production that much. Although they are paying him like, I think his average annual salary, that contract that he signed a couple years ago, was like $18 million. So I'm not sure they're getting quite the investment, not quite getting the return on their investment when they signed Sammy Watkins. But yeah, he's going to be back. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's obviously been battling injuries for the last few games. Towards the end of the season and then into the playoffs, he's been battling some stuff. Patty Mahomes, that dreaded turf toe, that's not going away. That could be a big factor against Tampa Bay. But so they get some guys back. Yeah, Le'Veon Bell, man, has his star fallen so far in a very short amount of time. Not sure if his stunt. Well, it wasn't a stunt. I mean, he was contract negotiations. He just decided to hold out from Pittsburgh, so that probably didn't turn out the way that he thought it would. But at least he got some. At least he got some guaranteed money. So that's good for him. And now he's on a team that might win the Super Bowl. So hey, if he does, he will always be remembered as a Super Bowl champion. And hey, better than what Pittsburgh did, right? So yeah. There's just a couple players out for the Chiefs, Eric Fisher being the most notable one, but all these other guys, they should be playing, other than Darwin Thompson, but I don't even know where he is on the depth chart. Is he like the fourth running back, something like that? So not a big deal for the Chiefs. Now for the Bucks, they got a few guys. So for the DNP, so did not practice, and usually when they don't practice throughout the week, you would tend to lean towards they're not going to play, and so that's Cameron Brate, their tight end. Well, they're back up behind Rob Gronkowski. Wow, I think I botched that. Jason Pierre-Paul, which that could not be good. They definitely want him to play with a knee injury. Ndamukong Suh, I'm guessing that's COVID related. COVID protocols. He's a DNP. Steve McClendon, defensive tackle. He was also, I think that's COVID related because he's not injury related. Although he was a full participant in practice, so as of Friday, so he's probably going to play. So it's just Cameron Brate, Jason Pierre-Paul, and Donkey Kong Suh, as some call him. They were the DNPs, so we'll see if that works out. The other people on the injury report, but that were full participants, were Antonio Brown, Levante David, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, like I said, Steve McClendon, although he had the COVID thing, Jordan Whitehead, and Antoine Winfield. So that is quite a lot of guys, quite a lot of their starters, and important guys to their team that were out. Like Antonio Brown, he was out against the Packers, and having Mike Evans maybe get a little more healthy. I mean, he's still dealing with that knee injury, but toughen it out. Levante David, of course, he played last week, so I'd imagine he should be fine. Antoine Winfield Jr., that's a big deal. He's their first-round pick, been pretty good this year for the Bucks there at safety. He missed the game against Green Bay, so they're probably happy that he's a full participant in practice, and so he will definitely be playing. So that is your injury report as of Friday. So there's just, I'd say it's more so for the Bucks. They're definitely going to hope that Jason Pierre-Paul and Suh can suit up and go out there and give him some good snaps, because being able to get pressure on Patty Mahomes and the Chiefs offense is going to be very important. All right, so that's the injury report. Now let's see how both teams, how they got here. Their record, all that, kind of the course of their season, stuff like that. So with the Chiefs, they went 14-2 this year, pretty impressive in that last game of the season that they lost. They weren't even. I'm not even sure Patrick Mahomes did he play like maybe a possession or maybe a quarter or something. I mean, yeah, it was a bunch of backup guys in that game against the Chargers that they lost. So you could kind of say when they had their full team out there, they were 14-1. But they ended the season 14-2. Obviously, they won. They won the AFC West. Wasn't exactly a good. Wasn't the greatest of divisions this season. Although I think there are good things ahead for the Chargers. They're getting Derwin James back. Justin Herbert's going to be his second year. They're going to have a pretty good draft pick. It seems like they always have problems with their offensive line, so maybe they use that high draft pick on an offensive lineman. Maybe there's a kid from Northwestern, supposed to be a really good lineman, that might be in their range, because I don't think they're going to get Penei Sewell, who's I think viewed as maybe the best lineman tackle in the draft. But anyways, I'm digressing onto Chargers talk, which let's leave the Chargers aside, even though I do think they're up and coming. Anyways, Kansas City had a pretty good year there, going 14-2. In strength of schedule, they're actually 6th. So although their division wasn't that great, they had some challenges. They played the Ravens, they played the Bills, they played Tampa Bay, they played the Saints. Let me see if who else did they play? They played the Dolphins. That's right. Yeah, they played the Dolphins. So they had a fairly tough schedule. So against teams that were 500 and above, the Chiefs were 5-0. So that's pretty impressive. Then, of course, since they were the number 1 overall seed in the AFC, they got that bye. So in the divisional round, the Chiefs beat the Cleveland Browns. A very entertaining game, although for a second there it looked like the Chiefs were going to run away with it. But then Patty Mahomes got hurt. Chad Henne had to work his magic, which he hasn't probably had since his last year at Michigan, when I think they got to the Orange Bowl or something. Had a good year. Chad Henne got him that win. Then the next week they had no problems with the Bills, and they stamped their ticket into the playoffs. Now for the Bucs, on the other hand, they had quite a bit of up and down to their season, quite a bit of drama, some things going on with him. Obviously, the big one being bringing in Tom Brady as a free agent on a 2-year deal to lead them to the playoffs, to playoff success, potentially to a Super Bowl, as Jameis Winston had his opportunities to show that he could be a franchise quarterback, and he definitely blew them. So they realized, they need to upgrade the quarterback if they're ever gonna get the most out of this roster, because it's been a good roster that they've been able to build up. Obviously, Tampa Bay, they've been in the cellar for quite a while here in the NFL. Although I do think when they had Lovie Smith, they were on the up and up. Lovie's first year was tough, but that second year he went 7-9, improved 3 games, but then they fired him. I'm guessing they fired him because they knew that they're going to draft their quarterback of the future, and I guess they didn't think coaching staff under Lovie Smith could develop a quarterback, so they wanted to go with a offensive coach, Dirk Cutter, who was a giant fail. Anyways, that's ancient history for the Bucs. This season, unlike the Chiefs, there's definitely some struggles at times. So they went 11-5 in the regular season. They were a wild card. They finished second place in the NFC South to the New Orleans Saints. Against 500 and above teams, the Bucs went 1-5 in the regular season, which not so good. Definitely, maybe not playing up to your competition, but that's also when you're able to finish, 11-5. That also means you're take care of your business against the bad teams, which sometimes the bad and average teams, because sometimes that in itself, if you let a team who you're definitely more talented beat you. That can be the difference between you getting into the playoffs and you staying at home. So they were able to take care of business against the teams they should be, but it was against the opponents equal to them. They went 1-5, so they had 2 losses against the Saints. The second one being a blowout. Who else did they lose to? Let's see. They lost to the Bears. Oh God, that game. That was quite the game. I will say. I believe that was a Thursday. That was a Thursday night game that they lost 20-19 to Nick Foles. That was definitely where. And I remember specifically that game, Brady getting really mad at his offensive line for committing some dumb penalties, pre-snap penalties. He had a word or two with them that the cameras caught. But yes, that was definitely not a good performance. Like I said, they lost to the Saints. They lost to the Bears. They lost to the Rams, 27-24. And then the next week, they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, 27-24, in another game where they had some turnover problems. But if they would have played just a little better, I think they could have beat the Chiefs that game. Their only win against a playoff opponent was a domination of the Green Bay Packers, 38-10. That was that was the game when you thought to yourself, oh, okay, now Tampa Bay's they're getting somewhere. But no, they still had some more struggles to get through. Their strength of schedule, so they actually they had a more difficult schedule by opponent win percentage than the Chiefs did. They actually were second in strength of schedule. So I suppose you could say that going 11-5 was an achievement, especially without a true offseason. All the stuff with COVID going on, having a new quarterback who's coming from a system where they're not nearly as aggressive with the ball downfield, throwing the ball downfield as they are, with Tampa Bay and Bruce Arians. So going 11-5, I suppose, wasn't that bad for the Bucs. It's just, I guess you would say that they've been a little bit inconsistent. Well, at least in the regular season, because in the playoffs they have played better. So, in the wild card round, they went to our nation's capital and beat the Washington football team 31-23, in a game where, although Tampa Bay, you never felt like they're going to lose that game, but they could never quite pull away. Every time it looked like they were going to be able to pull away, Washington responded with some points of some kind. So they were able to keep themselves in that game. But Tampa Bay was clearly the better team. They controlled the game, so they got the win. Then the next week in the divisional round, they potentially send Drew Brees off into the sunset with his head held low, certainly, as they beat the New Orleans Saints 30-20. That yes, that was definitely a good performance by their defense, just completely shutting down what the Saints wanted to be able to do, and obviously Drew Brees not being able to push the ball really down the field any certainly helped that, but it was a good performance by them. And then their offense was opportunistic, getting all those turnovers, converting them into points. And then they beat the Green Bay Packers 31-26, which will forever be known as a game in which Matt LaFleur decided that it was better to kick a field goal, expect your defense to get a stop, with enough time for your team to drive the ball again all the way down the field to get a touchdown. Now that would have won the game, but there were more extenuating circumstances that had to happen in order for them to win. But I'm not gonna let's not relitigate that game. They lost it. Tampa Bay won. Tampa Bay moves on to the Super Bowl. They're in there. That's how both these teams got there. So one thing that I looked at with both of these teams, just to kind of get a sense, sort of who was the more consistent team in terms of their production, offensively and defensively. Which team tended to have less variance in their performance? In other words, which team was throughout the season performed closer to what their average performance would be. So again, that to me, we're trying to measure just the variance, the spread of their performance. the volatility in their performance. Which team was more consistent? Which, I would say is a good thing, but, I guess maybe a little bit of inconsistency isn't so bad. And sometimes if a team is able to, one game put up 500 plus yards or something, that's an indication that they're truly an elite team, even though obviously they can't do that all the time. And they might have some other, pretty bad performances. But anyways, just kind of looking at comparing both teams. So when it comes on offense to how many points that the teams scored per game, when it came to the number of first downs their offense got, when it came to their total yards and passing yards, the Chiefs were the more consistent, as I would say. They had less variance in their performance. They were closer to being towards their mean. They were closer to being a sure thing what they're going to be able to do that game. By those standards, they were the more consistent team. For the Bucs, they were more consistent in their rush yards than the Kansas City Chiefs were, which I guess kind of makes a little bit of sense just because I guess I'd say that the Chiefs, when you have Patrick Mahomes and all those weapons, it's nice to have a good running game. And obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire started off pretty hot, although with injuries and stuff, and who knows, maybe hitting the so-called rookie wall. He kind of tailed off towards the end of the season. So they probably weren't quite as good as what they were at the beginning of the season when he was really going. But anyways, the Bucs, they were the more consistent team as far as their production and running. Now for defensively, on defense, the Buccaneers were more consistent in the points that they gave up. So how many points their opponents scored. They were actually the more consistent team. And with rush yards, they were the more consistent team in their rush defense, which makes sense since they were the number one rush defense overall this year in just about every rushing category. Yes, so in attempts and yards, and touchdowns given up and yards per attempt, they were the number one rushing defense. So it's not surprising that there was less variance in their defensive performance with respect to rushing. And then for Kansas City, so they were the more consistent team as far as their defense was in giving up first downs, giving up total yards, giving up passing yards. So overall, you'd say Kansas City was the more consistent team, just with respect to performing towards their average, what you would expect them to do throughout the season. And I suppose that makes sense. After all, they're 14-2. They're the best team. You have Patrick Mahomes. They seem to avoid, other than Sammy Watkins, I guess, maybe some of the big injuries, at least in the regular season. Obviously, losing Eric Fisher in the playoffs, that's a big injury. So if we turn just to the raw stats for each team, then we can look at the rankings. So for Kansas City, like in total yards, they were number one. In the number of plays that they ran, they were number 6. In turnovers, they were number 4, so they were good at not turning the ball over. They were number 1 in the number of first downs they got. They were number 3 in pass attempts, number 1 in yards, number 3 in touchdowns, number 2 in interceptions, so avoiding interceptions again. And then you see, kind of as expected with the rushing game. So they were 23rd in rush attempts. They were 16 in yards. They were 22 in the number of rushing touchdowns and 12 in yards attempts. So although they didn't have the most yards, obviously having Patty Mahomes head your offense, that's definitely going to open up stuff for the running game. You don't have to rely on the running game. You can use the running game as a complement to the passing game. And then for their defense, so they were 16th in giving up yards. They were 10th in forcing opponent turnovers. What else were they? They were 16th in pass attempts. They were 19th in giving up first downs. They were 20th in giving up passing touchdowns. They were 5th in interceptions. That's pretty nice. 14th in pass yards. For the rushing defense, they were 19th in attempts, 21st in yards, 10th in rushing touchdowns, 17th in attempts. So it's kind of the bottom third of the league, middle of the road kind of team as far as their rushing defense was. And overall, I guess that would just point out to you that this was an elite passing offense for certain, and when they wanted to run it, they were able to do so fairly effectively. And that their defense, in some cases, when you're blowing out teams, or maybe if you're in a blowout, although the Chiefs were definitely not blown out this year, sometimes you're just going to put up a lot of yards, might not necessarily lead to a lot of points, or the yards and points might actually be empty because the game's all but decided. So, sometimes the end-all and be-all, shouldn't just be the raw average numbers that teams put up offensively and defensively. But, overall, I would say it gives something of a picture of the team's performance. And, particularly on defense, they probably weren't a great defense. I don't think anyone would say that, but they do have some pretty good players, especially on their front line. They got Chris Jones, Frank Clark. Their linebackers are kind of spare, although they do have former Iowa great and Dallas Cowboy Anthony Hitchens, who I kind of wish we'd kind of kept, but free agency, can't pay everyone. Anyways, yeah, their linebackers, maybe not the greatest, whatever, although I do like their secondary. They got Tyrann Mathieu, Juan Thornhill, the second-year safety. Brashad Breeland's played pretty good. And they were able to, at least their secondary, get interceptions. I think they got something like 16, which was good for, Let me check that. That was 5th in the league. So, yeah, they had some good things about their defense. But, offense is what, straw that stirs the drink in the case of Kansas City. So, overall, I think these team stats just portray a team that's opportunistic with their defense, but it's the offense, it's the passing game, and then the running game from the passing game is what makes the Kansas City Chiefs nearly unbeatable, except for the Raiders somehow beat them. Good job, John Gruden. Also, good job on getting a 10-year contract, as he will definitely be there for a while, and you're going to need it because it's going to be tough. Anyways, all right, let's take a little deeper dive into some of Casey's players on offense and defense. Just kind of how they've done now that we got what's the phrase I'm looking at? The view from 1,000 feet or whatever, the bird's eye view of the team. Let's focus in a little bit to look at kind of how their guys performed. So yeah, I guess we should start maybe. Let's just start with some of their running back performances this year. Mostly it was Clyde Edwards-Helaire, so he was their leading rusher, in attempts and yards, rushing touchdowns also, yards per game, stuff like that. He had 803 yards in the regular season, 181 attempts. Started 13 games because he had some injury stuff going on. He also contributed 36 receptions for nearly 300 yards, 8.3 yards per reception, which actually is pretty good for a running back. Because most of those are going to be coming out of the backfield screens. It's not like they're setting him in motion or anything, or putting him in the slot or putting him on the outside. So that's probably pretty decent. If you look at some of his advanced running statistics, and I'm getting all these stats from a Pro Football Reference, so yeah, they're a good compendium of all sorts of stats. But of course, there's tons of places to get your NFL stats. You got your Football Outsiders, you got your Pro Football Focus, other places like that. Some of them you got to pay for them. Thankfully, Pro Football Reference is free, which is nice. But anyway, so some of Clyde that is a hard name to say. Clyde Edwards-Helaire's advanced running stats. So he had 39 first downs on his runs during the season, 419 yards before contact, averaging 2.3 yards an attempt before contact. So that's probably an indication that the Kansas City's offensive line doing a good job of keeping keeping lanes open, keeping him clean, so he can get into the second level to the linebackers and then to the secondary. So it's probably a good thing. He averaged 2.1 yards after contact, which, well, McCole Hardman actually led the team in that stat. But I mean, he has, gosh, how many? He has 4 attempts. That's you're dealing with sample size, so it's probably not the best thing to look at. Anyways, 2.1 yards after contact. He broke 15 tackles this season, which averaged out to 12.1 attempts per tackle break. So he needed every 12 running plays, he would break 1 tackle, which that's pretty good. It didn't lead the team again. That's because some of the guys who have rushing yards are not running backs. Like Patty Mahomes, he actually had 62 rushes, although I'm assuming some of those weren't designed runs. They were more scrambles because they don't really do it. I don't think they do a ton of Patty Mahomes, RPO kind of stuff there in Kansas City. Overall, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the bell cow. Ha ha ha. There's a nice little pun because now it's up to Le'Veon Bell, sort of, since Edwards-Helaire should play, but he's still dealing with injuries. Although Le'Veon Bell was also on the injury report. But yes, although Helaire was their bell cow, they've had to rely on Le'Veon Bell. Sorry, I know. Terrible dad jokes. And I'm not a dad. They've had to rely on Le'Veon Bell a little more as the season progressed. So he's got 63 attempts throughout the, I think this is, the regular season. 254 yards, 28 yards a game. Did have 13 receptions for just a little under 100 yards. He did average 5 yards at target, which is, that's pretty good. His advanced rushing stats, he had 18 first downs, 132 yards before contact. He averaged 2.1 yards before contact, and then he averaged 1.9 yards after contact. But he averaged, so he had 6 total tackle breaks, and so he averaged about 10.5 rush attempts per break. So that's actually a little better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I mean, it's only 63 attempts. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has 3 times as many attempts. So although it's just amazing to me how Le'Veon's fallen off so far, and I mean, he's only 28, and now he has been in the league a while, but 1 year he totally missed. So that's a year of not taking contact, of not getting your body beat up. It's just crazy to me to think that, is he really washed at this point? Is he never, going to get back to what he was all those years in Pittsburgh? I guess not. But anyways, he's kind of their second guy they lean on. And then there's also Darrell Williams, who's gotten a little more run, especially in the playoffs. He got some run too. He's another one of the guys. So during the regular season, though, he only had 39 attempts, 169 yards. Didn't do a whole lot throughout the season, but they did get him the ball some, and then of course they do get some rushing production from Tyreek Hill. They've done McCole Hardman, just trying to get those guys involved. But overall, they have a pretty effective running game. Again, it's and who knows, that might not be a good indication since they are missing Eric Fisher, and they're going with a couple backups. So. They might not have as much success against the Bucs because the Bucs are the number one. They were the number one running offense throughout the regular season. Again, as I went through beforehand, and yards attempts, all that kind of stuff. They were the best, so it's definitely going to be a tough day. But I'd still like Kansas City's chances just because they have Patty Mahomes. They can use play action effectively. They have so many weapons. If Tampa Bay wants to, commit to stopping the run, putting an extra guy in the box and leaving their secondary, one-on-one situations with Kansas City's weapons, that is definitely might not be a recipe for success. So as far as the running offense, it's pretty good. It's better than it was last year for Kansas City, and it worked well off of the pass. They're definitely a pass-first offense. That's what they do. That's where their best players are. That's where their most skill is. But they're an effective running team. And so then receiving, of course, you got, Tyreek Hill, you got Travis Kelce, and then you got other guys who contribute. So, McCole Hardman, Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson, those guys. They were able to contribute, but when it comes to passing, their big guys are, of course, Kelce. He had 105 receptions on 145 targets. That's pretty good. That was 72%. For that many targets, that's pretty good. He had over 1,400 yards. He averaged 13.5 yards, 13.5 yards a reception. He had 11 touchdowns. He was just good all around. Some of his advanced receiving statistics, so yards before the catch, he had 829. He had 70. This is insane to me. He had 79 first down receptions that resulted in a first down. That's just insane, considering he is a tight end. You just wouldn't expect necessarily a tight end to be able to do that much, but he is definitely a matchup nightmare. This is not Blake Bell, the Belldozer, if you know who that is. One of the Cowboys' like third or fourth tight ends. Not like that, or Jason Witten, where everything's the 3-4 yard out. No, he can definitely get the ball down the field. And then he had 587 yards after the catch. He actually broke 10 tackles. That was good for about 10.5 receptions per break. So, every 10 or 11 receptions, he would have a tackle break, which is pretty good. He had the lowest drop percentage of any of the receivers, which again is quite incredible since he had 145 targets, 105 receptions. He led them in both that categories, and yet he has the lowest drop percentage of anyone on the team that had, say, more than, let's just go with more than, gosh, if you go more than 30, or actually even 20, if for everyone that had more than 20 receptions, he had the lowest drop percentage at 1.4%. He dropped 2 passes this season. In the QB rating, so this is mostly Patty Mahomes, but some Chad Henne. The QB rating on passes intended for him was 119.8, which is extremely impressive. So Travis Kelce definitely had an impressive season. Actually, I guess I read an article, I believe it was by Ethan Douglas and Mike Sando at The Athletic, and they just had an article about, is this the best season by a tight end ever? They had a bunch of stats. So again, on the first downs, so they looked at tight ends, I believe it was past 20 seasons. So they just compared, Travis Kelce to all the other tight ends out there, how they did. And Travis Kelce, he was number 1 in first downs with 92. In expected points added, which is sort of the stat du jour among NFL stat nerds. It's the demon slayer of NFL statistics, because it's friggin' everywhere. You can't get away from it. Everywhere you go, you hear about it. If you read any people who do football analysis, they always talk EPA, expected points added. Just like if you're an anime fan, everywhere you go, you always hear about Demon Slayer. You always see him. If you went to conventions last convention a year in 2019, and then the beginning of 2020, tons of Demon Slayer cosplayers. Although I like Demon Slayer, don't get me wrong. I watched the first season. It was very good. I enjoyed it. Definitely want to see the movie whenever it comes out here, but it's just the ubiquity of it is definitely apparent. And it's the same way with expected points added. So, and as far as NFL stats go, that's the one they all love. He was second, 91.8. Rob Gronkowski in 2011 was number 1 with 113.3 expected points added. So, yes, he was only second. So, how unfortunate for him. And then one other thing they looked at was just the tight end route spread, which I think was just like how much of the field Kelce used on his routes and where he caught the ball. Because To be honest, I had kind of a hard time understanding what they were measuring with this stat. They didn't exactly make it clear what they meant by route spread, or was it he had the biggest variance between the targets or the completions of passes, to him. To be honest, it's a measure of the areas of the field that he caught the ball in. Is kind of how I got the sense of this stat. For this stat, he was number one of all the tight ends that they looked at. So he was getting the ball all over the field in comparison to other tight ends. And just watching some Kansas City games, you can kind of see that kind of makes sense. They don't just run again a bunch of short stuff with him. He's sort of all over the field in kind of the middle area. I mean, usually you're not going to line up your tight end, on the outside, but as far as tight ends go, he definitely has a big route tree. How about that? He's got a big route tree. Then the last stat that, I remember, they threw out a lot of stats in this article. It was a good article. Go read it if you're subscribed to The Athletic. Yeah, they're good stuff. Anyways, so again, they looked at the 20-year window for their comparisons. But for this stat, they just looked at comparing tight ends in a 3-year window. So any consecutive 3 years that tight ends were able, to play in. They looked at what percentage of yards that the tight end got as a percentage of the NFL leader in receiving yards. So basically, how close that the tight end was able to match the receiving yard production to the NFL leader in receiving yards in that particular 3-year window. And in the years that they looked at, Travis Kelce again was number one. As for the 3-year window of 2018 to 2020, Kelce had 3,981 yards, which was good for 96.1% of the NFL leader, who I believe was DeAndre Hopkins from 2018 to 2020. So that's insane that a tight end of all people was able to put that up. But there's some other guys that got pretty close. So Kellen Winslow, the father of Kellen Winslow Jr., the tight end in the mid to late 2000s, he got 96%. So Travis Kelce just beat him. But as far as yards go, he was way more. He's like 900 yards more than Kellen Winslow. But that kind of makes sense. It's much more passing league now. So usually it's not fair to compare eras, especially when, at least considering yards, it's not fair to consider receiving yards from 40 years ago to now. But still, it just shows you that Travis Kelce had an insane year, an insane run with the Chiefs, especially since Patty Mahomes has been there. Although, he was good with Alex Smith. Let's not pretend like he wasn't good with Alex Smith. So, anyways, although you would probably say that Tyreek Hill is their most dangerous receiving threat just because his speed is insane, Travis Kelce is probably their number one go-to option receiving. When Patty Mahomes needs a play made, that he's probably gonna look to Travis Kelce first. But Tyreek Hill again, he was pretty good himself. He had 87 receptions on 135 targets, good for 64%. But obviously, that's not as good as Kelce, but that's just a function of some of the routes that he's running. Routes way down the field, different routes where he's getting double team, stuff like that. Not running a ton of the underneath stuff that's a little easier to complete. So no surprise there that he's a little below what Kelce was. But he had almost 1,300 yards. He had 14.7 yards an attempt or reception. Sorry, he had 15 touchdowns. Pretty insane. 9.5 yards a target. That for any guy over about 20 receptions, that led the team. So he had a really good year. Some advanced stats for him. Let's see. He had 57 first downs from his receptions. Pretty good. He had 842 yards before the catch, so again, a lot of air yards to his receptions getting down the field. He averaged 5 yards after the reception. He had 8 broken tackles, which is pretty good. So that 10.9 yards or 10.9 receptions per broken tackle. That's pretty good. Not as much as Kelsey, but still pretty good. And the fact that he's compared, even other receivers, he's definitely not a big receiver, so that's pretty good. His drop percentage was 3.7%. He had 5 drops on 135 targets, so a little up from Kelsey. But the QB rating on passes intended for him was 129.1, which actually, that actually led the team of anyone. So even, the guys that had, 5 receptions or whatever, small sample size, he actually had the best of that. So that just goes to show you he was very impressive. But they also had, good contributions from Demarcus Robinson, McCole Hardman, both those guys. Demarcus Robinson at about 460 yards. McCole Hardman, 560 yards. Let's see, they both had 26, 23 first downs for both of them. Both had a couple broken tackles. They both had over 100 QB rating on passes intended for them. Demarcus Robinson, he had a bit of a drop problem, you could say. Let's see, at 59 targets, he had 8 drops. So that was 12.9%. So that's not so good for a receiver. Definitely would want to get that down. McCole Hardman and Sammy Watkins, they were a little more consistent as far as their drops were. They were only about 5.5 and 5.6%. Sammy Watkins had 420 yards, 37 receptions, 55 targets, only 11.4 yards a reception. I would imagine that's probably one of Sammy Watkins' lower averages for a year, just because he's kind of always been known as a guy with the speeds, as a real great speed as a speedster, coming there out of Clemson. But so I would say overall, kind of paints a good picture. And I suppose you should mention that also they do throw the ball a little to the running backs. Darrell Williams, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell, they contributed. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he almost had 300 yards, receiving. Darrell Williams, he had 116. Le'Veon Bell, he had 99. But with Pittsburgh, he definitely showed he can definitely catch the ball out of the backfield. So if he gets some more run today, then who knows, he might have a few receptions. But overall, the receiving, one of the best receiving cores, or at least their top 2. I mean, I suppose it's always hard to know how good some guys are when you have a quarterback as great as Patrick Mahomes, because he's going to make average receivers look a lot better. But I would say at least their top 2, that's Kelsey and Tyreek Hill, that's probably close to the best, and they got other guys who can make plays for them. So it's no mistake that they were one of the best receiving teams in the league. And why were they that way? Well, it's probably because they have Patrick Mahomes. If he's not the best quarterback right now in the league, he's certainly in the top 3, let's say, maybe number 2. But even though Aaron Rodgers just won the MVP, you'd probably still say Patrick Mahomes is the better passer right now. And he had quite the year, so he had 4,740 yards, total yards. He had, 38 touchdowns, a little down from last year, which is crazy since, it's 38 friggin' touchdowns. He was good for 66 completion percentage, 8.1 yards per attempt, 7.5 net yards an attempt, so that takes into account sacks stuff. He was only sacked on 3.6% of his dropbacks. He threw 6 picks, so 316 yards per game. His quarterback rating was 108, and his QBR, which is a different statistic, that's one created by ESPN, to be a little more accurate, because pretty much QB rating, I think it just takes into account like some of the basic box score statistics, completions, attempts, yards, touchdowns, interceptions, that kind of thing. QBR kind of takes into account a few more factors. It kind of looks like the context in which the pass, was thrown. So a pass on first and down from your own 25 that's good for 10 yards has less weight than a pass on, say, fourth down from your own 25 and fourth and, let's just say, 5. Fourth and 5 if you complete a pass for a first down. That's going to be weighted more than that first down, say back in the first quarter. So it just takes into account when the pass actually takes place to weight it, and then they do some more mathematical magic. It's just a different stat, and I suppose they would call it more accurate. Anyways, Patty Mahomes had an 82.9, and QBR is on a scale from 0 to 100. He had 82.9, so very nice, definitely a very nice season for him. Looking at some advanced passing stats, he has 4,900 intended air yards, so that means on all of his passing attempts, how many yards downfield was the intended pass for, so that the total, 4,900, that's pretty good. That means you're getting the ball definitely down the field. 8.4 yards, intended air yards per attempt, so it's not just a function of, having a lot of attempts. It's actually definitely pushing the ball down the field. What else did he have? He had 2,473 caught air yards. So how many yards did the pass that was completed go for just in the air? So it was before the receiver, was able to run with the ball after they got the catch. So he had 2,470 then, and he had about he had 2,267 yards after the catch. And that's good for 5.8 yards after the catch per completion. For his accuracy on his passing, so he had 8 balls batted, which is probably pretty low. That makes sense because, he's a pretty big guy. He's not like Drew Brees or Russell Wilson out there, or Baker Mayfield. Guys are kind of on the shorter side when it comes to quarterbacks. Always a danger that the defensive linemen can get their hands up and knock those balls down. He had 20 throwaways, a drop percentage on his passes. He had 28 drops, 4.9% drop percentage. Bad throws, so by this metric, again, this is from Pro Football Reference, and this might be one of the statistics I think that they get from somewhere else, because I'm not sure how many statistics they themselves make. They just report a bunch. But anyways, he had 100 bad throws. It was 17.6% of his throws they said were bad, but 436 were on target, so almost 77% of his passes were on target, so that's pretty good. And then the rest of those were just like spikes and stuff, throwaways, kind of stuff like that, where the quarterback, just has to get an incomplete pass, because when you're throwing the ball away as a quarterback, you want the ball to be incomplete. You don't want to have any chance of the ball being intercepted. So they don't take those into account when they look on your on target and bad throws, your off target throws. So those don't count. And again, that seems a pretty fair measure of what the quarterback's actually trying to accomplish there. Under pressure, Patty Mahomes, he was pretty good. He was only sacked 22 times this season. That's pretty good. The Chiefs have a good offensive line. He was blitzed 141 times. He was hurried on 62 of those, hit 61 times. 145 total pressures, so that was good for a 22.3% pressure rate on all of his dropbacks. So that's, again, off his 588. Let's see what else we can do. Compared to previous years, he's actually a little down in some metrics. So in total passing yards, he's up from last year. He's also up in attended air yards, although 2018 he's far ahead. He had over 5,000 intended air yards in 2018. He's almost there with caught air yards at 2,400, although per completion he's down from 2018 and 2019. And in yards after catch per completion, he's also down there. Just a little, though. I mean, he's obviously still doing really good. His playoff stats, though, this season, he actually has a higher QB rating than 2018 or 2019. Has 118. Again, just the passer rating, just the basic passer rating. Only takes certain things into account, so it's not really good for getting a holistic view of how the quarterback's doing. But in that respect, he's actually doing better. He's got more net yards an attempt, more adjusted net yards per attempt. He's getting sacked less. His yards per attempt are up again. His adjusted yards per attempt are up. His yards per completion, though, are down. Actually, a yard from last season. Yards per game, down 10 yards. And again, that some of that kind of makes sense just because they have a little bit better of a running game this season. But he's completing 73.5% of his passes, so I'd say he's doing pretty good. He's got 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, so he's having a pretty good. He had a good regular season. He's having a pretty good playoff performance so far. So in conclusion, Patrick Mahomes is good at being an NFL quarterback and will be for the foreseeable future. All right, so that's kind of the Chiefs' offense. Now their defense. Now for their defense, not quite as prolific as their offense, but it's still pretty good. Their top 3 guys in tackles are, unsurprisingly, it's two linebackers and a safety. It's Daniel Sorensen, Anthony Hitchens, Damian Wilson. Then Tyrann Mathieu is 4th on tackles, total tackles. Again, that's not surprising. For sacks, it's Chris Jones and Frank Clark. They're their main guys. And then with interceptions, Daniel Sorensen has 3. Tyrann Mathieu had 6. Very impressive. L'Jarius Sneed, he also had 3. Rashad Breeland has 2. Juan Thornhill has 1. So and again, they're one of the better teams as far as forcing interceptions. So pretty good performance by them, especially Tyrann Mathieu. How I wish Dallas had pursued him in free agency. What was that, a couple years ago? Alas, they elected not to, as they don't particularly value that position, I suppose, and it's not surprising at the performances that they get from it. But again, I'm letting my Cowboys fandom interfere with the Super Bowl discussion. Returning to the Chiefs' defense, so if you look at the completion percentage for some of their defensive backs that get most of their snaps, so we're just looking at Tyrann Mathieu, Daniel Sorensen, Rashad Breeland, Travarius Ward, Rashad Fenton, L'Jarius Sneed, and we'll throw in Juan Thornhill. He missed some time because he was injured, but just looking at them, Rashad Breeland, so passes intended for him, had the lowest completion percentage at 50%. That's pretty good, especially for guy, one of their starting cornerbacks. He's obviously going to get challenged a lot. Let's see, Tyrann Mathieu's at 62.7. Daniel Sorensen, who kind of getting burned with 76.7%. Travarius Ward at 57%. L'Jarius Sneed at just under 60%. Juan Thornhill at 64.5%. And then some of their linebackers like Anthony Hitchens, he's at 77.4%. So obviously that's pretty high, but again, he's a linebacker. So for one, linebackers typically aren't as good in coverage as your secondary guys are, and since a lot of the passes where they're covering, it's underneath stuff. It's not down the field, so it's a little bit easier to complete those. And the QB rating against, so Tyrann Mathieu, so passes intended for him, he allowed a QB rating of 60.2%. That's very good. And say Daniel Sorensen, he had 100.7. Rashad Breeland, 78.3. Rashad Fenton, 92.5. L'Jarius Sneed had 54.2. Travarius Ward had 103.1. Juan Thornhill at 102.8. So definitely their cornerbacks are pretty good in coverage, just based on those kind of statistics. And you can see that with the their Yards per target, looking at for Tyrann Mathieu, 8 yards. Rashad Breeland, 6.3. Rashad Fenton, 8.1. Charvarius Ward, 7.1. L'Jarius Sneed at 4.8, although he saw less time than some of those other guys. But overall, you'd say that their cornerbacks, especially, that's a pretty good cornerback core that they got going on there. Their safeties, maybe not so much. Maybe not so much as good, but although we have to consider sometimes with safeties, they're covering for other guys when there's, broken coverage. When the coverage from the cornerback gets beat, they're trying to clean up. So there's always, you would just expect that completion percentages, stuff like that, it's going to be a little higher against the safeties just because they're called a safety because, they're kind of the last line of defense. Like if defending, their own end zone. So it kind of makes sense that they would, have a little bit higher of the completion percentage, stuff like that, kind of stuff going on. As far as getting pressure on the quarterback, I think I already mentioned sacks. Frank Clark, Chris Jones were kind of their main guys. None of the other guys, I think, had more than, looks like 3. Alex Okafor, the linebacker, he had 3. So, yeah, Frank Clark and Chris Jones, definitely the guys that are getting pressure. Also, as far as QB hits, Chris Jones had 28. Frank Clark had 15. Alex Okafor had 10. And then, at least all the guys I'm looking at, no one even had, there's one guy, Michael Dana. I'm afraid I do not know who that is. He had 6 QB hits. Some of the other guys, Daniel Sorensen, Anthony Hitchens, they had 4. Tyrann Mathieu, he had a couple. Charvarius Ward, L'Jarius Sneed, they had 3 each. So those are your leaders as far as getting QB hits. Also, shouldn't forget Chris Jones. He had 20 QB knockdowns. For some reason, on Pro Football Reference, they didn't have Chris Jones listed on their advanced defensive statistics. I don't know why. I guess they must have been messed up somehow. But yeah, he had 20 QB knockdowns. He also had 16 QB hurries. And let's see, the other guys getting a lot of hurries. Yeah, Frank Clark at 9, and then everyone's kind of way down from there. Like Alex Okafor had 4. Tyrann Mathieu had a couple. They definitely like to blitz with their safeties. Tyrann Mathieu had 32 blitzes. Daniel Sorensen had 64, which actually that makes sense just because Daniel Sorensen's a little bigger than Tyrann Mathieu is. Then, Anthony Hitchens there at linebacker, he blitzed some 33 times. Damian Wilson, 38. Ben Neiman, 79 times. So that's kind of how they get pressure. So overall, that's the defensive performance of the Kansas City Chiefs. So with that, I think we can wrap that part of this up, and now we can move on to Tampa Bay. So I guess we should start with their offense. So Tampa Bay running the ball. They rely on 2 guys, Ronald Jones, the second, and a little Leonard Fournette thrown in there with just a dash of Keyshawn Vaughn. Ronald Jones, he got the bulk of the carries, 192, got 978 yards, almost 1,000, 7 touchdowns. He averaged almost 70 yards a game. He also caught 28 passes for 165 yards. Let's see what else. Yeah, he had 7 touchdowns. Let's see. He had 48 first downs. That's pretty good. 394 yards before contact, which almost as much as Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and just about as many as attempts. He averaged 2.1 yards before contact per attempt, and then he had 584 after contact, which that is better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 3 yards after contact per attempt. He only had 10 broken tackles, though, so that's good for every 19 rushing attempts. He had a broken tackle, so he was their lead running back, although he dealt with some injury stuff, so they had to work in Leonard Fournette more, especially in the playoffs. Playoffs, yeah. Leonard Fournette in the regular season, he had 367 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns though, 20 yards per game, 3.8 per attempt, not so great. But he had 6 touchdowns, and a lot of those were in first and goal kind of situations, under 10 yards to go. So you figure you're gonna have a lower rushing a lower rush yards per attempt, just by virtue of being your real physical running back that you use more in goal to go situations. But there's no way to get around it. 3.8 yards per attempt ain't good. He also had 21 first downs. That's pretty good, but 2 yards after contact per attempt and 1.7 before. And then he has the dubious distinction of, in his 97 rushing attempts, he broke 0 tackles, according to Pro Football Reference. Good for, 0 on his attempts per break. So that's definitely a dubious distinction of his. But what can you do? I guess in conclusion, and they also throw Keyshawn Vaughn. I think it's Keyshawn. It's not Keyshawn. I think it's Keyshawn Vaughn. He had 26 attempts, 109 yards, and LaShawn McCoy, who I believe, the past season or two, he played with Kansas City just because, the Andy Reid Philadelphia connection. Anyways, Shady had 10 attempts throughout the regular season for 31 yards. I think it's safe to say his best days are definitely behind him, as he's 32 years old. So yeah, the end is nigh for Shady McCoy. So yeah, Ronald Jones is their main back, their bell cow. We'll see how healthy he is for the Super Bowl. If not, they're going to have to rely on Leonard Fournette, who's actually done pretty good in the playoffs, I will say, for the rushing game. So we'll see how much the Bucs, how much they use the running game maybe to control the game, play keep away from Kansas City, or if they find themselves in a situation where they're behind by, say, 10 or more points, they have to abandon the run. Because with Ronald Jones especially, Tampa Bay has definitely been effective running the ball, and that's not unsurprising, as they have one of the better running offensive lines, both passing and run blocking in the league. So looking at their receiving, their main contributors there, they have a lot of weapons when it comes to receivers. They got Antonio Brown, they got Mike Evans, they got Chris Godwin, they have Rob Gronkowski, they have some Cameron Brate thrown in there. They got a little bit of Scotty Miller too. They are just loaded when it comes to receiving. When it comes to receivers, they don't use the running backs very much in the receiving game, and that's totally fine because they have so many other guys to spread the ball to. So, just looking, say, Antonio Brown, he wasn't even there the whole year. I think, 8 games he was with them in the regular season, or maybe less than that. I don't know. He had 45 receptions, 483 yards. He had 4 touchdowns, 60 yards a game, 72% catch percentage. Passes intended to him, 7.8 yards a target. He was really good, in other words. And he was, the third best receiver, third or fourth best. Obviously, Mike Evans, 109 targets, 70 receptions, good for 64%. He had 1,000 yards. He averaged 14.4 yards a reception. He had 13 touchdowns, 9.2 yards a target. He was definitely the number one guy. Definitely got to support Mike Evans because he's an A&M guy. Been battling, injury. I think it's knee pretty much the entire playoffs, but he's been able to tough it out, and he was able to play all 16 games, and he's been able to play in the playoffs so far, so he hasn't slowed down a whole lot. Chris Godwin, who I will admit I do not remember him at all coming out of college, being a really talented guy. He was drafted in the 3rd round, but I just did not know anything about him coming out of Penn State that he was that good. And I consume a lot of college football, try to keep up with it, but I totally missed the boat on him. And Interestingly enough for him, he is about to become a very wealthy man as this is the final year. So since he was a third-round pick, those contracts that players in those rounds sign, those are 4-year contracts, no team option for the 5th year. So he's going to be a free agent after this season, and he is going to be in for quite the payday, I would imagine, as he only played in 12 games. He had some injuries, and he had 840 yards. He had 7 touchdowns, almost 13 yards per catch. He had a 77.4% completion percentage, which is just insane to me as a receiver. Who a lot of his stuff is down the field just because he's very fast. Definitely a speedster. So he had 10 yards at target. What else? Did I already say he had 7 touchdowns? I think I already did. 70 yards a game, so he actually averaged more per game than even Mike Evans did. And then you have Gronk. Gronk had 45 receptions on 77 attempts. He had 623 yards, 13.8 yards per reception. That's pretty good for a tight end. I was very glad when I picked him up for my fantasy team. As I think the tight ends I had, or actually I can't remember if I started out with Gronk or if I added him at a later point. Anyways, although my fantasy team sucked, he certainly did not overall. Although he did have a couple of stinker games. But anyways, yeah, Gronk had 7 TDs. His completion percentage on passes for him were only at 58.4%. That's a bit low, but a lot of Gronk's stuff is down the seam, down the middle. So again, he's not a tight end who all of his stuff is under 5 or 10 yards. Say he does get down the field, so that would be one reason probably why his completion percentage is a little off. And again, just because took a year off and in a new system too, a new quarterback. Well, not a new quarterback, but a quarterback getting acclimated to a new system. What else? Who did I miss? Scotty Miller. I guess you could call him the man of the Green Bay game, at least, for that touchdown that put him up 21-10. He had 33 receptions, 500 yards, 15.2 reception. He's definitely a long threat. He definitely has he might be their fastest receiver. I don't know. Antonio Brown, perhaps maybe a couple years ago, would be the fastest receiver. Although I don't know. I mean, he still looks pretty quick out there. But yeah, Scotty Miller. He had 3 touchdowns, caught 62% of the passes intended for him, 9.5 yards at target. And then, they also had Cameron Brate, a little bit of Tyler Johnson, O.J. Howard, the 4th-year man, or maybe this is his 5th year out of Alabama. Never quite lived up to the hype. Also dealt with tons of injuries, but the Tampa Bay, they are not lacking in receiving options for Tom Brady. And Brady, you would say he had a pretty good year, throwing for 4,600 yards, completing 65%, almost 66. He had 40 touchdowns as a 43-year-old. That's pretty impressive. He had 12 picks. But that's far less than Jameis Winston was throwing. So anything less than what Jameis Winston is throwing, it's not a high bar to get under, but definitely more effective than Jameis was as far as not turning the ball over. He averaged 7.6 yards an attempt, 11.6 yards of completion, almost 290 yards a game, QB rating of 102, QBR of 72.5. He was actually sacked less than Patty Mahomes, only sacked 21 times. Net yards an attempt, 7.1. Adjusted net yards per attempt, 7.53. Yeah, Tom Brady, he was very good. He had less balls batted down. Again, this is probably more a sign of his offensive line per se than just compared to Mahomes. He only had 4 passes batted and 610 attempts. He did have more what Pro Football Reference had as bad throws. than Patrick Mahomes did. So Brady, he had 20.6% of his throws, 122 throws that they labeled as bad. And then he had 438 on target. That was good for 73.9%. But again, that kind of makes sense. New guy into a new system without a full off season, or a normal off season, I guess you would say. So it's no mistake that he's going to have some, he's going to have some difficulties getting acclimated to all that. Have a few more bad throws, have a few more interceptions, perhaps, than what we're used to Tom Brady doing. Let's see, what else? Only sacked 21 times. I believe Patty Mahomes was sacked 22 times. Blitzed 161 times, hurried 34 times, hit 58 times, and pressured 113 times. Less pressured than Patrick Mahomes was. But that's kind of also a Brady thing, is being good about getting rid of the ball before the pressure gets there. If you have to take the underneath routes, that kind of stuff. So Brady's always been good about being able to avoid pressure, not because he's particularly agile or quick or anything like that, but in fact, you would say he's better at this now than he was earlier in his career. Just being able to have functional, maybe, agility in the pocket to be able to avoid pressure and avoid biggest hits. That's definitely been one reason for his longevity in the sport. His intended air yards, 5,500. He's got more than 5,500 yards. So, that's more than Patty Mahomes. One, because he threw the ball more, and two, because in Bruce Arians' system, definitely want to get the ball down the field. And 9.1 intended air yards per pass attempt, and 2,800 caught air yards, and then 1,800 yards after the catch. So that's just an indication that, definitely getting the ball down the field to his receivers. And I looked at some of Tom Brady's numbers broken down. I call it the. I'm still working on a name for this index that I want to create. I call it the Kakegurui Let's Get Our Gambling Freak On Index, and is basically just a way to show that how well the quarterback, or how much the quarterback is throwing the ball down the field. So what I did, and for some reason I can only find these stats for the last 8 games of the regular season and the 3 playoff games. I got these from Next Gen Stats. And for some reason, I couldn't. They didn't have them for the first 8 weeks for Tom Brady for some reason. Something wrong with their website. I don't know. But anyway, so I wanted to look at passes of 20 yards or more, just pass attempts of 20 yards or more for Tom Brady, just to see, if that changed over the course of the season, if there are any trends. Although it would be hard to get a trend when you have only 11 observations. Not a whole lot, but I just looked at the 20 plus yards attempts, completions, touchdowns, interceptions, what percentage of total pass attempts those were, and the percentage of the completions that those 20 plus yard completions were. And so, I want to make this my own Kakegurui Let's Get Our Gambling Freak On Index, or maybe just call it the Yumiko Jabari Index, or the something referencing Kakegurui, because as we all know, no one has more fun than high school gamblers, as Kakegurui has taught us. Although I gotta admit, my favorite part of the first season of Kakegurui, because I haven't yet seen season 2, I know I'm way behind, but I got a ton of things to watch. What can I do? Anyways, my favorite part about Kakegurui was the ending theme, the video during it. It was boy, talk about getting your heart beating, get your blood pressure up. Whoo boy. So if you just start at week 9, when I could pull these stats. And that was the second game against New Orleans that the Bucs got destroyed. So Tom Brady in that game, he was 0 of 6 on his 20 and plus yard attempts. He threw 0 touchdowns. He had 1 pick. And so about 16% of his total attempts. So he had 38 attempts in the game and 6 20-plus yards. So he had about 16% were the 20-plus yards. Now for Week 10, he was 0-3. No touchdowns, no interceptions. And that was good for about 7.6% of his overall pass attempts. Against the Rams, he was 0-6 again for 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So yes, very unproductive there with his deep balls, and he threw 12.5%, whereof of his total pass attempts were the deep throws. So not too good there. Then in Kansas City, another game they lost, but they almost came back to win. He was 4 of 7 in that game from 20-plus yards. Threw a touchdown, did have an interception, and he threw about 17% of his throws were 20 or plus yards, and about 9, almost 10% of his completions were 20 or plus yards. Next game after the bye week against Minnesota, game they blew Minnesota out of the water. He was 2 of 4. He had a touchdown, no interceptions, and he threw about 17% of his throws were 20-plus yards, and he had 8.6% of his completions were the deep balls. Against Atlanta, he was 3 of 5. He had a touchdown and no interceptions. That was good for 11% of his attempts and 6.6 of his completions. Then against Detroit, who was one of the worst defensive teams in the league, he was 6 of 8 for 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. An absurd almost 30% of his attempts were 20-plus yards, and 22% of his completions were 20-plus yards. So that's one of the many reasons why Matt Patricia was fired as the Lions coach there during the season. Although at that time he wasn't the coach, it was their interim coach, who I forget who it was, but yes, definitely an indication that things did not go well for the Detroit Lions pass defense that season. And then their last game, the regular season, Brady was 3 of 9 on his 20-plus yard attempts for 2 touchdowns and a pick. So he threw about 22% of his attempts were the 20-plus, and 7% of his completions were. Now for their game against Washington, that wild card game, Brady was 4 of 7 on his 20-plus yards attempts. He had 2 touchdowns, no picks. Threw about 17.5% were 20-plus, and 10% of his completions were 20-plus. So pretty good. Against New Orleans, so that second time, he was only 1 of 6. He had no touchdowns, no interceptions. He threw about 18% of his passes were deep balls, but only 3% of his completions were. So, yes, not the most productive day, but that was against a very good New Orleans secondary, especially. Now against the Green Bay in the conference championship, he was 3 of 9. He had a touchdown, but he had 3 picks. Ooh, that's very bad. I'm pretty sure I'm going to need to add to this index. I'm going to need to add something like QBR or passer rating, or I don't know, expected points, something like that. Definitely got to capture when it doesn't go so well for you when you're taking risks, because, hey, that is the point of taking risks. There's a big payoff, but there could also be a big loss. That is what makes gambling fun. Although I don't do gambling, because I would be terrible at it and I would lose all of my money, especially if I try to do sports gambling. Instead, I do football cards. I kind of consider it as a kind of gambling because, hey, you never know what you're going to get. You could get the Patty Mahomes rookie card that's going to be worth thousands of dollars, or you could get nothing and blow quite a bit of money these days. Football cards are not cheap anymore. Anyways, yeah. So, yeah, he threw 25% of his attempts were the 20-plus variety, but only 8% were a completion, so not the most effective. Although I guess if you had to plot this, you would see maybe those first. I think you'd say he's thrown the ball a little more downfield these past, say, 7 weeks, maybe overall, and well, he's definitely done a better job of completing it to his receivers down the field in these last 7 games. So and that makes sense. Just getting more familiar with the offense, more familiar with your players, having more time to I'm not sure how much practice time NFL teams had this season truly. But it just makes sense that as the year went on, that maybe have a little more success, and so those gambles paying a little more off as time wore on for the Bucs. And then just looking at like his, and this is from Next Gen Stats. This is just his passing chart for the whole league. So it just divides it at passes that are behind the line of scrimmage, that are within 10 yards, within 10 to 20, and then 20 plus. Behind the line of scrimmage, Brady was average. Under 10 yards, Brady was above average in both down the seam to the right side, to the left side. He was above the league average on those. For the 10 to 20 yards, he was quite above league average on those. And then in the middle, he was still above the league average, looking at his QB rating. And then downfield, 20 plus yards, looking at all of passing attempts compared to the rest of the league. So on the left side on the field, his pass rating was 80.1, better than the league average is 75. Down the middle, though, the league average is 86.1. He was only 57.8. But on the right side of the field, he was 122.3, whereas the league average was 78.3. Obviously, that sort of makes sense. Him being a right-handed quarterback, being more comfortable throwing to his right, perhaps. Although it's interesting that it's so low down the middle of the field, just because compared to the league, from 0 to 10 and then from 10 to 20, he was better than the league. He was over 100 passer rating down the middle, but those 20 plus yards down the middle, only 57.8. So not quite as good, but overall. You would say Brady was very effective, just like looking at some of his splits, as good as he was when they didn't use play action. Like he had a passer rating of 98.2, 28 touchdowns on 500 attempts. He had 8 picks, sacked 18 times, 65% completion percentage. But on play action, he completed 65%, and this was only on 110 attempts. So he was 65%, 1,120 yards, 12 touchdowns, 4 picks, a 120.2 QB rating, and only 3 sacks. So the Buccaneers definitely do a good job of using the play action, as all the good teams are able to effectively use play action nowadays in the league. Although mostly Tampa Bay, most of their offense was from shotgun. So on Brady's pass attempts, 466 were from shotgun. He actually had a better QB rating under center, so he completed just about as many completion percentage under center, but he only took 144 snaps under center for passes, but his QB rating was 116. He had 13 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, while with shotgun he had 27 and 9. But again, that's a lot more of his completions or attempts were from shotgun. But very effective under center. Let's see. Some other splits for him. Unsurprisingly, his QB rating goes up as the down gets later into the drive. So on first down, he's got a 91 rating. Second down, he's got 108. Third down, 110. Fourth down, 72.2. It's sort of unsurprising that it would go up, just because usually first down, that's going to be when you pass on that down. You can be your most aggressive, so that's when you would have the best chance to be able to complete those long passes, which are more difficult, but they also lead to a more reward. he would definitely say. So it's kind of no surprise that on first down, it wouldn't be as good as second or third. And then, of course, on fourth, when you're having to throw for it on fourth, the defense knows what to expect. That's going to be very difficult to complete. So no surprise there. But he was very effective on those. And then if you just look on like first and when it was 1 and 3 yards to go, he had 128 quarterback rating. When it was 4 through 6 yards, still 115. 7 through 9 yards to go, he had 96, and then 10 plus yards, he was 94. Although on these stats, I wish I could. I'd probably have to do a lot more digging, unfortunately, than when I'm able to, just to see how often, like especially on like the 7 to 9 yard ones and the 10 plus yards, how often he was actually able to get a first down on those. That would definitely be a very important stat to know, which is why QB rating by itself isn't necessarily the greatest. But hey, what can I say? I'm just a guy doing this for fun. I am not a professional NFL data analyst, although that would be a fun thing to do. I guess the last stat, well, we could talk about how well Brady does run-pass option, but he only did RPOs on 14 plays, it looks like. His throws when he did run-pass option, he threw it 14 times on those. So that's probably not the best sample size to look at in order to make inferences from. He threw it. He completed 71% of those. Got a touchdown. Got an interception too. But Brady's definitely not going to be a run pass. Big on that. Big doing that. He's definitely not a big threat with his feet. But when you look at his time in the pocket, so when he had less than 2.5 seconds, he completed 70% of his passes, 2,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 picks, had a 95.2 QB rating, sacked 5 times, 6.2 on his adjusted yards per attempt, and then just 6.1 on yards per attempt. But when he had 2.5 seconds or more, he completed 60% of those. He had 2,600 yards on only 278 attempts, so that's less than 2.5. He had 110 rating, and he had 22 touchdowns to go along with 5 interceptions. And his yards attempt were 9.4, and his adjusted yards and attempt were 10.2, which is absurd. But that's to be expected because the longer you either because of the play, like you just have to hold the ball a little longer, or the more time your offensive line is able to give you because either they're just that good or the defensive line is that bad, or they're not bringing pressure at all. I mean, it could be that the defense is, got 5, 6, maybe even 7 people in the secondary because they're covering. They're trying not to give up a pass on a first down. Still, though, Brady was very good on those, the 60% completions, the 22 touchdowns, the adjusted yards per attempt. Very effective, which just goes to show you that is another indication on balls downfield that Brady was able to be very effective in those, which is amazing since he's 43 years old and he was going into a new offense. I think it just shows that Brady was able to take what the Bucs they'd already built over the past few years, getting that roster together. He was really able to take them over the top. I would compare him to a character from a very dumb anime series that I've been watching recently. It's an old one. It's called Those Who Hunt Elves. If you want to know how dumb it is, just Wikipedia. Just look at the synopsis. It's as dumb as you can describe it. It has some funny moments though, because it's a comedy series. But anyways, there's a character in there that her name's Irie. She sort of brings, because the main story of it's a group of people. They get transported to a magical world. They have to hunt some elves. I'm not going to tell you what for. Anyways, the characters, they all have their own unique personalities. The male, he's kind of a hothead. The other girl is she's sometimes immature. Sometimes stuff gets away from her. Because, she's a teenager, so you'd expect that. But one of the characters, her name's Irie, she's sort of a little more mature, has some more experience. is able to keep the team together and focused on able to get the task accomplished at hand. She's also, I guess maybe you'd say, maybe the smarter character. Maybe not book smart, but more like certainly more emotional intelligence, because she's an actress, I should say. Anyways, she's kind of able to bring the team together and to get them focused, keep them on task, and to be able to balance out all the unique personalities that all the other characters in this series has in the same way, I would say. Tom Brady was able to bring together this whole team, get them together as a functioning unit, get them to perform better than they had before, and you can definitely tell that with penalties. But anyways, yeah, Brady was able to bring their team together and get them to perform at a level that they hadn't been able to perform previously, because they were led by Jameis Winston, who, as we all know, is a turnover machine, and probably at this point not the guy you want leading your NFL team. Although, who knows, he's still young. He might get another shot. He's with New Orleans right now, and who knows, if Drew Brees retires, then it'll be a competition between him and Taysom Hill, unless they try and go, I don't know, trade for a quarterback, if they were able to do that, or draft one. Anyways, what I'm saying is, yes, Brady is he was the finishing touch on the Bucs roster. Let's keep it on offense. He was the finishing touch that they needed to get them to where they were, which was in many ways an effective offense, but since they turned the ball over, that kind of hurt everything. Brady is what got them over the top, which is a credit to him, being 43 years old and still being able to perform at a high level. Now, for the Tampa Bay defense, we can just go over them kind of real quickly. And again, I think I mentioned that now, well, they're going to hope that they have Jason Pierre-Paul, and they'll probably have Sue, but especially for Jason Pierre-Paul, they're definitely going to want to have him, because those guys, they really depend on a lot of him, Shaq Barrett, William Golston, and then their secondary. They go with a lot of young guys too. Devin White, Antoine Winfield, who he was a full participant in practice, so he should be good to go. Sean Murphy-Bunting, I believe he's in his second year. I have his rookie card. So I'm hoping for big things, although with defensive players, it's usually not going to work out good for you if you're trying to go for value there. Anyways, they depend on some youth in their secondary, but up front it's kind of old guys. It's Jason Pierre-Paul, Ndamukong Suh, Shaq Barrett's, he's 28. They're linebackers, Levante David, older guy, so yeah, he's 30 years old. So those are kind of the guys that they depend on. Let's see what else. Their leader in tackles, Devin White, who'd been hurt, I believe, the past couple games here in the playoffs. He led them 140 tackles and 97 solo tackles. Levante David, he was second with 117. And then, you got Antoine Winfield. Definitely looking like that was a very good pick for them. He had 94 tackles. And then Devin White, Levante David, they had tackles for loss, 15 and 12. They kind of led the team. And then Shaq Barrett had 11. Jason Pierre-Paul had 7. Sue had 9. William Golston had 8. For QB hits, again, Devin White, he was 16th. So that's pretty good for an inside linebacker. Let's see. Shaq Barrett, he had 16. Jason Pierre-Paul, he had 14. Sue had 19. William Golston had 20. And sacks, that would be Jason Pierre-Paul, 9.5. Shaq Barrett, 8. Devin White, again, very effective. That was, he's turned out to be a very nice player from them. I believe he's from LSU. He was on that national championship team that was absurdly loaded with talent. Antoine Winfield had a few. He had 3 sacks. Let's see. Sue, did I already say? Yeah, he had 6. Golston had 3. So for some of their secondary guys, as you would expect, since they rely on some more younger guys in their secondary than maybe Kansas City relies on, they weren't quite as good. Just giving up completions and yards per target and the QB rating on those. Like Sean Murphy Bunting, he allowed 77% completions for 12.2 yards per completion, a QB rating of 121. Carlton Davis, another one of their cornerbacks, another young guy. He's only 24. He allowed 62% and 87.6 rating, which it's quite a bit better. 13.2 yards a completion. Let's see, Devin White. Well, no, let's go to Antoine Winfield. So he was at 77%. 17.5 yards per completion, 13.5 for a target. Gave up 6 touchdowns. 147.2 QB rating, but again, some of those would be the result of just blown coverages or just kind of a coverage mix-up where there was just a mistake in who's supposed to go with who, and he's having to trying to cover a guy that someone else should have gotten. He's the last line of defense, their last hope. So maybe not a big surprise there that some of their younger guys were struggling. But, they were able to get a lot of pressure, definitely with their linebackers, with their defensive line. They were definitely able to get a lot of pressure. Like, for instance, let's see, William Golson, like he had 29 QB pressures. What is this? Sue had 44. Jason Pierre-Paul had 55. So they were very effective at getting to the quarterback. And they also like to blitz. Todd Bowles, I think, is definitely known for that. He's a blitz-happy kind of guy when it comes to being the defensive coordinator, so definitely a lot of blitzing. So Shaq Barrett blitzed on 122 plays, which is unsurprising because they play a 3-4 base defense, and your outside linebackers are going to be used a lot to get to the quarterback in a 3-4 base defensive scheme. So that's not surprising there that he blitzed a lot. But Sean Murphy Bunting, they blitzed 27 times. Levante David, they blitzed 65. Devin White, 91. Antoine Winfield blitzed 45 times. Jordan Whitehead, their other safety, 36. Jason Pierre-Paul, 70 times. William Golston actually led them in QB knockdowns with 17. Shaq Barrett had 10. Donkey Kong Sue had 13. Jason Pierre-Paul only had 4, although he did believe he was first with sacks. I think 9.5. I think I said that. Another guy that they haven't got a lot of use just because he's been hurt a lot, although he's healthy now, is Vita Vea, the nose tackle. He's known as a guy that can definitely get pressure on the quarterback and absorb blockers as well. He's good there as a nose tackle, so that might also be another thing to watch for with the Tampa Bay defense. How much pressure they're able to get on Mahomes, how much they bring the blitz, how much they leave their secondary out on an island to be able to cover one-on-one, especially their corners. Are they going to be able to stay with McCall Hardeman, with Tyreek Hill, and whoever? Is it going to be a safety? Is it going to be a linebacker on Travis Kelce? It's definitely going to be a tall task, but I would imagine that Tampa Bay, at least maybe in the first half at least, they'll see how it goes, but the first half they'll play their defense like they have pretty much the whole year, being very aggressive with blitzing and whatnot, and leaving it up to their secondary to be able to cover guys in one-on-one. I mean, you got to say in the first meeting anyways, they did pretty good. So overall, the Tampa Bay defense has been very good at times. Obviously, I think as mentioned in the beginning, there's some high variance to their performance, but they're definitely capable of playing at a high level. All right, so now that we've looked at both teams, what do I think is going to happen? What is going to be my prediction for the Super Bowl? Well, I actually went my prediction for how the game is going to play out is, I think that the injury to Eric Fisher is going to be a big thing to the Kansas City offensive line. I think the Tampa Bay defense, even without having to blitz a lot, I think they're going to be able to get a lot of pressure with Devin White being back, with Levante David being mostly healthy, being able to work in Vita Vea in their rotation, their defensive rotation. Now they definitely are going to need Jason Pierre-Paul to be healthy to be able to perform. But I mean, because that's definitely going to be a big thing. But I mean, I was just surprised because I don't remember him getting injured in that game. But tough guys gotta, I guess, play through injury. They don't want to maybe make those always apparent. But anyways, I do think Kansas City is going to be able to get a lot of pressure on Patty Mahomes. He's battling turf toe, which is, just an injury that's not going to go away. He's going to be dealing with it. And unfortunately, I'm sure having 2 weeks off mostly is probably good. But once he gets back in the game, I would imagine it's definitely going to be bothering him. So I think that the defense is going to be able to put out a lot of pressure on Patrick Mahomes. And that's going to affect, just what kind of routes that his receivers are going to get run. He's not going to be able to go for, Tyreek Hill 40 yards down the seam or whatever, or down the right or left side, down the sideline, just because I think there's going to be a lot of pressure. So he's going to have to go underneath, take what the defense gives to him. Going to have to be able to prove that he can move in the pocket effectively, not necessarily to run, because obviously we know that Patrick Mahomes, he's not what I would say a running quarterback, although he's able to make plays with his feet outside the pocket. He's not a burner. He's not Lamar Jackson out there, and he's such a good passer that anyways you don't want to have him running a lot and just taking big shots. But he's an effective quarterback with his feet, but he's not Lamar Jackson, or heck, I would say he's not even Dak Prescott, even that good. But anyways, I just think that he's going to have a tough time, and this game isn't going to be as high scoring maybe as everyone thinks it's going to be. I mean, I suppose there is always a chance that I'm completely wrong, as I am about many things when it comes to predicting and forecasting. As we all know, forecasting is a very difficult task for people. If you're familiar with the work of Philip Tetlock, showed that some of the people who are most confident in their forecasts are oftentimes the most incompetent. So I don't claim to be a miracle worker or have some sort of special knowledge or a unique forecasting ability that puts me above everyone else. I'm just trying to tell you what I think. Anyways, so I think maybe a little lower scoring that you would expect, and I mean, I think that kind of accords well with their first meeting. I mean, both teams actually were able to put on pretty good defensive performances. I mean, they were able to Kansas City was able to force Brady to make a lot of mistakes, but on the other hand, Tampa Bay was able to hold Kansas City to only 27 points because of those mistakes, and they had a chance to win there at the end of the game. So they were able to get stops when they needed them. But I kind of see this. I see this as a game where it's the Tampa Bay offense is really going to test the Kansas City defense in a way that even in their first matchup they weren't able to test them, and that in the playoffs they sort of haven't been tested at all. I mean, Cleveland, we kind of know what Cleveland's offense is. When the run game is working efficiently, then they can throw off of that. But at this point, with Baker and the receiving core, they weren't quite the passing offense that was going to be able to match what a Kansas City at full effectiveness, full health with Patty Mahomes would have been able to do. And then the Bills just they kind of didn't give themselves an opportunity because they got down so much because their defense was so poor, and they settled for a lot of field goals. So Kansas City just ran away from that game. So it didn't really matter kind of how their defense was performing. They were definitely going to win that game. But I just think with all the weapons that Tampa Bay has on offense, I'd like to say if Ronald Jones if he's closer to being full health, that Tampa Bay would be able to have like a more balanced kind of run attack, as I think that going up against Patty Mahomes, they're going to want to maybe lean on the running game just a little bit more. I mean, obviously, they threw the ball more than Kansas City Chiefs, so they're definitely a pass-dominant team. But I think maybe in this game, having Ronald Jones and then having Leonard Fournette, who's done a decent job in the playoffs. He wasn't so great in the regular season, but in the playoffs, he's been much more effective. So I think Tampa Bay is gonna try and control the clock a little bit more than we'd expect with the running game. This is still Bruce Arians. They're still gonna throw the ball down the field. They're still gonna take shots when they can. Although, again, I think it's a pretty decent Kansas City secondary, so I think they might be up to the task. But I think this is gonna be a game that Tampa Bay amazingly pulls out a win. I'm gonna go with 24-20. A much lower scoring game than I think a lot of people have. That is my prediction. Your favorite sports fan / anime fan has now given you his prediction for Super Bowl 55. You can all now rest easy. But overall, I mean, really, when we get down to it, I just want to see an entertaining game. Because I don't mind when games, are defensive, when they have a lot of good defense going on. If they're lower scoring. I mean, I will say Super Bowl 53, the Rams and the Patriots, that's maybe a little too much defense for my taste. I'd like to see a little more offensive performance in that game. And since I don't like the Patriots and I generally dislike them and root against them and actively want them to fail, it was definitely not a good day for me. Anyways, yeah, so hopefully we'll get an entertaining Super Bowl that affords us many dramatic moments, changes of fortune, amazing plays, and hopefully the last drive will be the one that either team maybe they have to go down the field and gets points, either touchdown or field goal to win the game. Those are always fun. Those last second games where it's hanging in the balance there up to the very last play. That's always fun. So I guess with that, giving you my prediction, that is the show this time. I talked for a lot longer than I thought it was going to. I thought it was going to struggle to get to an hour, and instead it looks like I almost got to 2 hours. So thank you for listening to all this. As always, you can listen to this podcast up on YouTube when I make this into an episode, and it's also on the Podbean app and also on the Podbean website. So if you just go to the Podbean website and just look up Aim for the Top Sports Review, you should be able to find the website. You can also, if you have any comments, suggestions, if you want to yell at me for my opinions, or anything else to get in contact with us, you can do that on our YouTube channel. So just look up the 28house. On Twitter, it's just at the _28house. On Instagram, it's at the 28house. On Twitch, which one day we're going to use again, the _28_house. On Facebook, it's at the real 28house. Although I think if you just to look up like our page, like if you just look up the 28house and you see our orange and blue logo, kind of looks like the Smash Ball from Smash Brothers. That's us. And then email. So email us 2/8house@gmail.com, and 2 and 8 are spelled out, so they're the words, not the numbers. So 2/8 spelled out house@gmail.com. So leave us any comments, suggestions, new topics you want to see. If you have a suggestion for a sports anime that you'd like me to watch, because I'm going to watch the first, let's just say like 13 episodes of Ice Shield 21. So that'll be my anime series that I tackle this month, and I'll do it at my review at the end of February. So that'll be interesting. Debut of a new segment there. Anyways, thanks for listening. Till next time, be well. Let's all watch this hopefully very entertaining Super Bowl. And with that, I will have my boy Rick Perry send you off.
Adios, mofo.